When starting out on Airbnb, one of the most important things you want to do is make sure that the unit you're going to set up is actually going to be profitable. Otherwise, it's going to be a massive waste of your time and money. Luckily, that's what I'm going to talk about in today's video. Ultimately, making money is why most people get into Airbnb, and it is possible to make some really good money. But you need to make sure you've done this upfront research first. So in this video, I'm going to cover everything you need to do before you even think about opening up Excel to crunch some numbers. Once we've covered all that, I'll break down one of my units, which I had, and the spreadsheet I used to see how much money I would possibly make or wouldn't make from the deal. Hello people, I'm Jim. Welcome to the channel. I'm a property investor who's documenting my journey to financial freedom from my day job. I'll be breaking down everything to do with property investing in general, and getting a better grip on your personal finance. So if you're like me and want to grow your wealth, then please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and turn the notification bell on so you know when I post new videos. So if you've watched my ultimate step-by-step guide to starting an Airbnb business, you'll know one of the things I speak about is to make sure you understand your competition. This is called a due diligence report, which is something you want to do when starting out on your Airbnb business, but even more so when you want to drill down into the numbers. Now, the amount of competition will change depending on your location. If you're within a city centre, for example, it's not going to be the same as a small town. For example, a city centre, you might be able to set your radius for half a mile, 1 mile, or 1.5 miles, and there might be lots of operators within those areas. Whereas if you operate within a small town or a more rural location, you might have to cast the net a bit wider. Something to bear in mind with doing this is to make sure that they are actually your competition and not just any operator. This is best explained by thinking about your target market. If you're aiming for business guests or contractors, this is not the same as a cottage who are targeting couples to come for the weekend. This target market should, in my opinion, inform every decision you make about the property. This will include the layout, the type of finish, and the most important thing, which is the price. So in order to get to know each of the other operators in your area well, I used to create a report for the different operators. I will leave a link to the Google Sheet in the description. If you're looking for somewhere to start, this might be the best place. But the most important thing you want to pay attention to when spending time on Airbnb and really understand is how much the people charge in the week and how much they charge at the weekend. It is normal for every Airbnb unit to up their rate at the weekend. But if you're in a tourist location, the amount you can up this by might be more than in a contractor location. Remember, if you're in more of a tourist area, this is where you're going to make most of your money, at the weekend. As the theory goes, you're going to get less bookings in the week. So you want to completely understand how much each of your competitors are charging in the week and at the weekend. If someone is charging well more than the rest of the other operators, you need to understand why. Do they offer a different service? Is the layout completely different? Reading the reviews is normally the best place to find this information. But overall, all of the competitors should not be a million miles away in terms of pricing. Now, pricing can change depending on the amount of guests you allow to book. This is another area of consideration when thinking about your pricing. For example, when I had my units, we had a basic price for 2 guests. Then for every other guest, it was an extra £10, with the maximum amount being 6. Some people might have similar pricing models to this, or they might have a higher price, but it does not change based on the amount of guests who book. The reason we operated this price model was due to the fact we wanted to represent good value for money for contractor guests. When starting out, we spoke to a number of different firms about how they operate the accommodation for their workers. Now most, not all, but most, give the contractors the money, and it's down to them to find the accommodation. Therefore, the contractors want the cheapest price per night per head. So any money they can save in accommodation, they get to keep. So it was in their best interest for it to be really cost effective. Again, this is all target market driven, but some operators might have preferences on how they do it. So make sure you understand what other people are doing in your area and what works for your target market. This next one is something to probably consider down the line and is not something you will factor into this spreadsheet. But most Airbnb operators have different pricing plans for different times of the year. For example, they might operate a winter pricing plan from September to March, then a summer one from April to August. Again, I will probably repeat this so much, but when I talk about Airbnbs, this all depends on your area and target market. This is why it's so critical to understand your market well. So it was worth having a detailed look at the pricing calendars for all of your competitors, which is a nice link to the next thing to keep an eagle eye on, which is how booked up the calendar is. This will give you an idea about how much demand there is for the unit. I will mention another way later in the video, so make sure you stick around for that. But look through the calendar for the next few months and see which times of the week are most booked up. And in theory, this should line up with the type of guest you're looking for. Although this is good, it's not a full representation of how booked up they might be. For example, I know for a fact contractors will leave at 24 hours before they are due to stay somewhere before booking it. and it's very, very last minute. Leisure guests tend to book a bit more further in advance. So again, it is all dependent on the target market. But if you see some nice longer bookings in the calendar, that's always a good sign. Now, the most important part of running an Airbnb business is cleaning. You need to understand how much everyone is charging for cleaning, as this might be enough to change the guest's mind if they are really cost focused. So you need to stay really competitive with cleaning costs. But getting an idea of how much everyone is charging for cleaning is important and will feed really well into the next section about knowing your costs. Understanding your costs are really important within any business, and this is no different in running an Airbnb unit, with both fixed costs and variable costs. So let's do some Business 101 and define both of these. First up, we have fixed costs, with everyone's favourite website, Investopedia, stating, a fixed cost is a cost that does not change with an increase or decrease in the amount of goods or services produced or sold. Fixed costs are expenses that have to be paid by a company independent of any specific business activities. So regardless of how much business we get within our Airbnb, we still have to pay these costs. The following is a list of what I believe to be the fixed costs for running a unit. Rent/mortgage, insurance, utilities, Wi-Fi, council tax, unless you're on business rates, TV license, channel manager fees, and management fees. Now, these last two might not affect every Airbnb operator. A channel manager is a piece of software which acts as a hub for all the online travel agents, like Airbnb and Booking.com. This allows you to make changes in the hub, which will change all of these websites instead of logging on and having to change information manually. Not everyone on Airbnb will use these, but I think it's a good idea to be on as many platforms as possible, so it's worth it, and obviously this has a cost to it. Then finally, we have management fees, which is where you pay a certain percentage of your revenue for someone to manage the property for you, which means they will look after everything to do with the running of the property once it's set up. Now, personally, this would be my preference if I was to ever operate an Airbnb again. But if you want more information around this, please check out the video I made called Why You Should Never Do Rent-to-Rent on Airbnbs. After the fixed costs, we have the variable costs, with the Investopedia definition being, a variable cost is a corporate expense that changes in proportion to how much a company produces or sells. Variable costs increase or decrease depending on a company's production or sale volume. They rise as production increases and fall as production decreases. So the variable costs are the following: cleaning, linen, OTA commission, payment gateways, maintenance and furniture. Now, it's worth explaining some of these as it might be the first time you're hearing about them. So your cleaning and linen makes sense when you think about it. The more guests you have means the more changeovers, which is when the house gets cleaned and all the linen changed. Now, what is an OTA commission? Well, this stands for Online Travel Agent Commission. This is the slice of the pie which Airbnb will take from you. Now, this can vary depending on the country and the options you choose. The first option is a split fee, and this means the guest and the host split the fee, with the host paying 3% of revenue and the guest paying a 14.2%, which is added on to the top of their booking at the end. Or you can go for a host-only fee, which is where the host will pay for a fee, and this is typically between 14 to 16%. It depends if you want to pass the cost on to the guest or swallow it yourself. This next cost might not apply to you if you're an only operator on Airbnb, but if you have a channel manager, like we mentioned earlier, you'll need a way to take payments, which is where you'll need a payment gateway. This is a company who will process payments for you. You can normally link all of this up in your channel manager. The cost of this can vary between providers, but it's normally around 1% of the payments. Then finally, we have maintenance and furniture costs, which you might have to pay for each month, but this can change from month to month. Normally, if something gets broken, you will bill your guests for this, but there might be times when you're looking to improve and upgrade stuff within your unit. When it comes to furniture, it is worth mentioning that you might want to lease them and pay it back each month. This would then land in the fixed cost list. It would save you needing lots of money up front, but it takes away from your cash flow, so this will depend on your situation. It can also offer some tax benefits, but you would have to speak to an accountant before doing it. Now you have pretty much all the costs involved with running an Airbnb unit month to month. You can start researching how much this stuff will cost in your area. If you're doing a rent-to-rent deal, it should be pretty easy to find out the cost. Just check Rightmove for the type of property you want to rent and use this as a ballpark figure. If you're purchasing the property, then you can use a mortgage calculator online to see how much your payments will be. Now, you need to make sure you get a mortgage which will allow you to use the property as an Airbnb unit. So I would certainly speak to a good broker if you're thinking about doing this. Next, you need to research how much utilities will cost you each month. Personally, I think the best way to do this is to speak to other investors or Airbnb owners in your area. Try and find people who do Airbnb in a similar location to you. If you rock up to a property networking event, normally there's someone there doing Airbnb. Chances are they might be in your area. If not, they might know someone. If this fails, you can never go wrong with asking a HMO landlord in your area how much they spend on utilities, as it's probably going to be similar. Finding out Wi-Fi should be straightforward with some Googling and comparing prices online. The only thing you want to check is the speed of your competition on Airbnb. If everyone's expecting Starlink and you're giving them dial-up, they will not be happy. Anyone else still have nightmares about that dial-up noise? And then we're on to what I think is the hardest part of the business, which is the cleaning and the linen. Again, if you have local contacts, ask them how much they pay. Or a good idea is to ring 3 different companies who offer the service and see how the prices compare. This will vary so much from location to location, so there's definitely no ballparks for cleaning and linen. We've already covered OTA commission and payment gateways, along with maintenance and furniture. So once you have done all this research, you should have a good idea about how much all this costs. Now before we can start crunching some numbers, we have some last bits of research to do. At the start of the video, we spoke about checking Airbnb to see what your competitors' occupancy was like. But there's an even better way of doing this, and it's a website called AIRDNA, which will offer different data about vacation rentals, which will be really informative when you're just starting out. To be honest, this is a service we used to pay for as a business to keep track of the local market. But you can get some really good information for free at the start, so don't worry about paying for anything. All you need to do is visit the website and search for the area you're thinking about operating in. The free version will give you information about average daily rates, occupancy rates, and revenue. Now, if you want to go into more detail and check the graphs for month-by-month data, I think this is one of those paid-for features. As well as this, you'll be able to see a map of your local competition within your area. And if you click on each one, it will give you some data about how they're performing. If you continue, it will give you more information about the type of rental properties, the types of sizes, the accommodation, the expected rental growth within the area, what amenities the units have, and some stats on the rating on Airbnb, rental activity, and finally information around the cancellation policy and minimum stays. So there's lots to get your teeth stuck into. But as we're going to be looking at how much money we can make from a deal, the main data we are interested in at this point is average daily rates and occupancy rates. After doing all this work, you should be in the point where you can start putting some information into a spreadsheet. Now you can either make your own spreadsheet, which I'd actually recommend as you will fully understand how everything works, or you can use the one I made for my Airbnb business, which I'll link in the description below. But I ask one massive favour, and that's while you're down there, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. So I'm just going to take you guys on a quick tour around the spreadsheet, which hopefully you're using in the description below. If not, you can maybe use this as a basis, as somewhere to start for your spreadsheet. It's not perfect, it's just one that I made myself in my Airbnb business. And this is actually the second deal we ended up taking on in Warrington. So the only places for you guys to fill in is anything filled in light blue. So you've got your rate during the week, and then you've got your weekend rate as well there. So as you can see here, for one person it was £65, and for 2, so our pricing model was 2 people, it was a basic rate, and then we used to charge £10 more at the weekend. And then for each person over that, it was a fiver more in this particular property. So that's where all these numbers come from here. Obviously, you guys can have a play around with it, try different weekday and weekend rates and different basis for number of guests. We done 7 guests. I think that was the maximum for that property. So yeah, and then along here we've just got different occupancy rates here, and then the amount of guests that stay, all the way down to sort of like worst case 10% there. So as we can see here, we've got all our revenue based on these numbers. So one guest 100%, £2,030, and then best case would be £2,780 at this particular property. So not too bad. And then when it comes to fixed costs and variable costs, anything in blue highlighted is for you guys to fill in. So the rent, this was a rent-to-rent deal, so the rent on this was $550, insurance $38.50, utilities $150, £20 for the Wi-Fi, council tax $97, TV license $12, channel manager, which we spoke about earlier in the video, $21.60. No management fees, so there is an option here for you to put management fees in if you want. Obviously, we were self-managing at this point, so that meant our fixed cost overhead was £889. So next up, we've got cleaning. It's best to probably budget a couple of cleans a month. This cleaning team at this time used to look after our linen as well. To be honest, that was probably a bit cheap at the time, so I think you're probably worth putting that in at least 100 there. And then that should all change. Linen hire, yeah, like I said, the cleaning company used to look after that. OTM commissions, now this will change depending on what platform and if you use channel manager stuff. But if you solely Airbnb, it's around about 15%, so that's the nice chunk of the pie they take off your hands for you. Payment gateway. Now, if that's going to Airbnb, you won't have to pay the payment gateway. So if you want to remove that, you can do. Not planning any maintenance or furniture at this stage, but you can have a play around with that to see what it would look like if you had to up that on an ongoing basis. But if you're just setting the units up, you'd like to think there won't be any maintenance or furniture costs in the short term, because you should pass these costs on to the guests if they break anything. So then there's your subtotal for your variable costs. And then this will be your net profit per month based on different occupancy rates. So as you can see here, 100% with 7 people is £1,345.40 in your arse pocket. So as you can see there, for one person it'd be £715.40, which is probably triple what you'd get for a buy-to-let, which is really good. And the most important thing for this is to have a play around when it comes to different occupancy rates. So if you use AIRDNA, you should be able to get some information about occupancy, and you should sort of know where it lies. So obviously up here is like best case, but you sort of want to be breaking even at around about 50%. So as you can see here, yeah, it's just breaking even there with maybe 4 people, I think, 4 or 5 people in at 50% of the time, and then there's a slight loss at 50% of the time with the rest of it. So the general rule of thumb with Airbnb is you want 50% to break even. So it's around about that there, and then obviously worst case is sort of down here. So yeah, my advice would be just use this, have a play around, or use it as a template. Or if you guys have got any other ideas what you think should be in this spreadsheet, then please let me know in the comments below. But apart from that, guys, enjoy playing around with it. Now, I will state, even if you do all of this work, it still doesn't mean that your Airbnb will perform how you predicted. It may do better, it may do worse. There is always that risk in actually taking action. But by doing this, you can plan for the worst and hope for the best. My advice would be to play around with this spreadsheet and input different numbers when it comes to pricing and occupancy, so you know what it looks like if the world ends. I would not worry too much about things going really well, as you will just enjoy the ride if that happens. The key when making any investments is always to make sure you protect yourself from the downside. So with all that said, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel and drop a comment if there's any questions or there's anything you agree with or disagree with. And if you want to connect, please reach out to me on Instagram at Jim_Holland182. And I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one. Cheers.